Welcome back to the Computer Applications Technology PAT for grade 11. So we're continuing with phase 2 at the moment. For phase 2, we first need to create a questionnaire and administer it to 20 people. So you have two options. You can either use a Word document to design the questionnaire using electronic forms, or we can use Google Forms. Now, if you have access to internet at all, this would be a very big advantage to you because you can actually then transfer the information electronically to Excel with virtually no effort from you. Never mind the ease of administering it. Instead of actually going around to people with a piece of paper or actually asking them to come and sit in front of the computer one by one, filling it in, or sending it to them one by one, you can actually send it to them. It collects the data automatically. It just makes life so much easier. So to do this, you need a Google account. So log into your Gmail account and then go to the Google Apps in the little corner over here to the 9 dots and go to Drive. So I've seen some people, if they log in for some reason, they don't see Google Apps, then you can just type in at the top Google Drive or search Google Drive and open Google Drive once you've logged into your Gmail account. Then you should be able to find this quite easily. Then you go to New, More, Google Forms. Alright, so this is the interface that we'll be using. At the top here is where you'll give your form a title. So it has to be meaningful. It has to be something with regards to your topic. So let's say your topic was on e-health, so it will be e-health questionnaire. And please try to keep your questionnaire as professional as possible in terms of the actual spelling and using capital letters where it's necessary and formatting in general and good questions, just so that when you ask friends and family to actually send it to other people, that they are willing to do that. Because just think about it, if you have to send it on to other people, if it looks bad, you're not going to want to do that. So please keep it professional. Once you've typed in the heading at the top, you can then click on this section over here that says Untitled Form, and then it will automatically put the heading there as well. At the top here, Form Description, you can put in an introduction where you actually say who you are and what this form is about. So something that actually contains your name and just says what the purpose of this is. Next up, we're going to have a look at how we can change the look of our form. So over here, you'll see there's an artist palette. So that's where we can customize the theme. So you can change the theme color, background color, and the font style. Actually, it's the best if you keep with this, since this would use the least data for your respondents. If you really want to, you can also change the header, which means the top section over there. You can go have a look through all of these, and if you really want to spend the time, you can also upload photos. So you can have a look at that. But for now, I'm just going to change the color and play around with the fonts and make the questionnaire my own. You'll see any changes that I make. For a second or two it says saving, and then after that it says all changes saved in Drive. So you don't actually have to press save at any point. It's saved automatically. So you can, at any point, if you have to leave the class or you have to come back and do this later, you can just log into your Gmail again, go to Drive, and then you'll see your questionnaire will actually be one of the documents in your Google Drive. Do you see this one that I just used? There it is already because it's saved automatically. So now let's start with the questions. You have to put in a title and description to add a heading. And since we need at least 2 headings to get our marks, I'm going to put a title and description to start my first section that I'll call demographic information. Now, this is where I'm going to ask questions such as people's name, surname, age, gender, and that kind of thing. So you can go ahead and do that. To add more questions, you can just type in name, and you'll see it's often smart enough to actually change the type of question here automatically. So you saw that was a basic question already. So if it didn't do that, you could have just changed it by hand over here yourself. So to add another question, you just press plus, name, surname, and I'm putting these separate because there is a mark for that in Access later on, that you don't have this in the same field. And you'll see there's a button here that's called required, and I'm leaving it off for name and surname, specifically because I think that this should be optional. And if you want, you can maybe put instructions in for the people to tell them this is optional. So if you want to do that, the 3 dots at the bottom here, you can click and go to description and tell them optional. Even though, let's just quickly, I'm going to put in another one that says age. Now, here's something very cool happened. So it changed to short answer, and it actually added a response validation. Now, just like we learned in Access about validation rules, that's basically what it did, is it changed the data type actually, so it's not really a validation rule. You can change it to a validation rule where you make greater than or less than, something like that. You can actually do that and say less than 100, because I've seen some people putting silly things in. So maybe number less than 100 if you want to. Something like that. But either way, make it a number. This is basically a validation rule to check that people don't write in text. So even though it's a short answer field, you're changing the data type basically. Now, age, I want to be a required question. So I'm going to switch this little toggle on. Now let's go see what this questionnaire looks like up to now. So at any point in time, if you want to see what the questionnaire would look like, you can go to the preview, and then you can see what it would look like to someone if you'd send it to them. So you'll see at the top it says, it basically gives a key, and it shows that anything that's required will have a star next to it. So age will have a star, so they'll know they have to fill it in. But you'll see, even though name and surname doesn't have a star, people don't always realize that it's not compulsory. So therefore, if you want to specifically point out that it is optional, you can add a description in that says optional. But that's not a must. That's just what I like to do. So do you see that a title looks quite different from a question? It very specifically gives me a nice heading like that. Okay, so I'm going to close this tab and go back to this one and add some more questions. So for gender, you'll see it also gives me some options. I can add female, male, and prefer not to say. Other, it's up to you if you want to add that. I prefer to just add prefer not to say. And please do not add this add other over here. This add other, let me show you what that does. Gives people the option to type something in. So this is a very useful tool, but definitely not for something like gender, because people, especially school age learners, tend to type in complete nonsense over here. So don't do that. So I'm going to remove this option and leave it like that. So now we've got name, surname, age, and gender, which is required. So if I want to swap any of these questions, you'll see I've got this, these little dots over here. I can also just go and swap these if you want. And I think now I am ready to add my next section. Well, it's not really a section, this is a section, but that creates like a next page, so don't use that. I'm just going to add my next heading, add a title and description, and so here I'm going to put in e-health questions. Now, for something like eHealth, I think it's good to maybe put in a basic definition. Please, not more than 2 lines, because people don't want to read a long discussion about it, and it has to be very simple. So it can't be a very complicated discussion about what it is. But it's very good. Like, you really don't have to do that for social media. Everybody knows what that is. But eHealth, I don't think a lot of people would know what you're referring to when you're talking about eHealth. So depending on what topic you chose, it's good to maybe put in a description on, just to make it clear what you mean. And now we're going to add more questions. So let's quickly discuss what question types there are, just so that you know what questions you can use, and then you have to continue making the rest of the form yourself. So we've got short answer, which was useful for putting name, surname, and things like age. The only other place where you're going to use short answer is if you have a question where the answer is probably a number, like the number of hours that you spend a day on games or on social media or something like that. Now, I know people tend to usually put that as a multiple choice and then say 0 to 2 hours or 3 to 4 hours, something like that. But it's actually better to put it as a short answer and put it in as a number. So how many hours, blah, blah, blah. And put a response validation in as a number, because then you can actually do a calculation in Excel with this. You need to think ahead about what number or what data types you need to be able to process this data at a later stage. So you can't ask questions that will only be text-based, basically. So you can also use short answer for a question that will have currency as an answer. So how much do you spend in a month on whatever. And remember, with how many hours, you also have to say per day. How much do you spend in a month? And then that can also be short answer. Now here, I would say use description to first say, please answer in South African Rand, a number only, no R symbol. That way, they know how to fill this in, and then you can add a response validation that says it has to be a number. Okay. And then if you want to put validation in that says it has to be less than a specific amount to avoid very odd answers, you can also do that. So that's actually basically the only questions you can ask where you'll use the short answer data type. So let's quickly talk about the types of questions you're going to ask. So you basically get 2 types of questions: open questions and closed questions. Open questions are wonderful for interviews. You ask people how they feel, their opinions, but it's not that great for a questionnaire because we need to be able to analyze it. So things like let's just add a question here, using a paragraph or a short answer where people can actually enter text is a no-go here, because that will give us open answers. It'll be an open question, and you won't be able to analyze that in Excel or in Access. We need closed questions. So we need questions that are multiple choice, checkboxes, yes or no, a scale, something like that, because we need to give them options to choose from so that we can analyze the answers. Okay, so let's quickly have a look at these 3. You get multiple choice, drop down, and checkboxes. So multiple choice and drop down both only allow people one choice. The difference is with multiple choice, they can enter an additional, their own choice basically, and drop down they can't. So let's do that quickly. Gender can basically actually be drop down, and then you'll see there isn't something that said add other. And that is what it would look like then. Okay. Whereas if I'd say, for example, what social media do you use? Oh, they're clever here. They changed it to checkboxes. Let's rather say, oh, suddenly I can't think of a question. Either way, let's quickly do this. Facebook, Instagram, etc. Now, with checkboxes and with multiple choice, there's this thing called add other. And like I showed you earlier, that allows people to type in themselves. And this is very useful because you can't always think of all the options. Things like what games they play, what social media they use. You can't always think of all the options. So there, it's useful to actually put in other. Now, the difference between checkboxes and multiple choice is that multiple choice people can choose only one, whereas checkboxes people can choose more than one. But again, this is just a built-in feature. People don't always realize that. So please be specific in the description. Actually say that. Choose all that apply. You have to be specific. People don't realize that they are allowed to choose more than one. They don't necessarily associate a checkbox, a square checkbox, with being able to choose more than one. Now, let's go to a scale question. You have to also have a scale question. Let's say something like, okay, I'm going to make a statement and say, our lives are better with internet access. Okay, and I'm going to make it a linear scale. I'm going to make it 1 to 6. I'm going to show you why now. And then it's extremely important to actually say what does 1 mean and what does 6 mean. So I'm going to say 1 is disagree and 6 is agree. Okay. Now, I'm putting on required for most of these questions, you'll see. And basically the rule will be everything has to be required unless there is a very specific reason to not make it required. So let's say the first question was, are you a gamer? And the next question is, if yes, what games do you play? Then the follow-up question doesn't have to be required, but the first question had to be. Okay, so let's go and have a look at the scale question. So you see it's nice with the labels. They actually show you disagree and agree on both sides. You could actually say, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Or I actually don't like very much saying on a scale of 1 to whatever, especially if they can see it's a scale question like this. So that's not necessary. But with this, I would probably say, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? So 2 things I want to point out. Firstly, I put an even number of options here so that there is not an option in the middle. Now, this is a good practice so that people don't always go for the middle option because that's what people tend to do. So now they have to lean towards disagree or they have to lean towards agree. Okay, that's the one thing. The second thing is, since I'm going to be sending this over mobile phones, I'm not going with all the way to 1 to 10. That's too many numbers to actually display on a mobile screen. Even 1 to 6 is almost pushing it, but 1 to 6 is literally the max you can put on a little mobile phone. I promise you. Especially if the labels are a bit long, but you have to try to keep those short. So please, with a scale question, have an even number so that there is not a middle point. And please don't have a scale that's longer than 6 since it has to show on a mobile phone. And with the scale question, it's extremely important to phrase it clearly what the lowest number and what the highest number means. Okay, the one thing I haven't said, which I think is quite obvious, but you have to know what your topic of phase 1 was. Your questionnaire has to be the same topic as phase 1. So if your phase 1 was on e-health, if your phase 1 was on social media or on gaming or on whatever, it has to be the same topic. And it also has to be the same language. So even though you're in an Afrikaans school maybe and you did your PAT in English, then your questionnaire also has to be in English, please. Now, something that's quite important is that you also have to include a question about the negative aspects of your topic. So don't just ask all about the usage and all. I know lots of people, like for example with gaming, they'll ask, how many hours do you spend on it? What games do you play? That kind of thing. You have to also ask about the negative aspects of it. Do people think it is addictive? That kind of stuff. Okay. Or with online shopping, have they actually lost money before? Have they been a victim of credit card fraud? Something like that. It has to have the negative aspects as well of your topic. At least one question. Okay, lastly, the one question that we do still need is you have to have a straightforward yes and no question as well. So something like, do you play games? Okay, and then it is literally just yes and no. Do not add the maybe, because if you add maybe, then you can't use the yes or no data type in Access. Okay, so please have a straightforward yes or no question as well. So, as a summary, you need a question that's a plain yes and no question. You need a question that's a scale question. You need a question that has a multiple choice kind of aspect. It doesn't necessarily have to be one that they can choose more than one, but if you do, then that's great. You have to have a question that has a number as an answer, whether it's currency or whether it's just a plain number, either one or both. That's also great, but don't force it. I mean, if you can't think of something for currency, then don't ask that. And then overall, you have to have 5 of the topic questions. So in your topic, let's just go and look at what we have by now. So the demographic questions doesn't count as the number of questions. You need to have 5 questions under here. All right. Now this you have to send out to people. Before you send it, it's important to ask a family member or a friend to actually check it and see if it makes logical sense. Because you set up this questionnaire and you think everything makes sense and the question in your mind makes sense, but it doesn't necessarily make sense for them. And at no point should the person filling in the form be unsure about what to do. And please check even things like punctuation, like this question that doesn't have a full stop or a question mark at the end. Please check that questions all start with a capital letter. Use proper spelling. This is not time for shortening words or things. Use proper words, the proper terminology. Although I must say, if you are setting your questionnaire in Afrikaans, I would say rather use the technological terms in English, because the average Joe on the street is not going to know the Afrikaans tech terms. That I would do, but nothing else. Okay. Oh, and for the Afrikaans people, if you write the word instead of a, it's a single quotation mark and an N, by the way. Okay. All right, so to send this questionnaire to people, you go to send. If you know their email address, you can type it in here, but most people will actually be using the link option. So you copy the link. Now, even if you shorten it here, it's shorter, but it's still not short enough to type into WhatsApp easily. So we're going to copy this long link, and we're going to go to use bit.ly. This is a nice shortening service. Go down a little bit. Paste your long link and click on shorten. There is my short link. Okay, now this one is nice and easy. I'm going to just take out my phone then and type this in and send this to people. It is case sensitive. Now, lots of times when you get one of these, there are L or capital I's in there, and you can't actually tell which is which. So it's sometimes necessary to actually copy this and paste it in Word and then format it. Let's actually do that. Format it as Courier New. That's actually a nice one to use. Make it nice and big for yourself, and check that you have the right letters, or that you're not using a 5 instead of an S or something like that. So it's case sensitive, and you have to test it yourself before you go and send it to other people. All right. Okay, that's the questionnaire. I know that was quite long, but I've basically explained to you what kind of questions to ask as well as how to do it. So once people have filled it in, just so that you know, you're going to see over here at the top, it's going to start saying responses, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then by the time we're done, we're going to be able to just download it in spreadsheets. I'll show you how to do that in the next video.